hands together and help me welcome our next speaker, Dhiraj Mukherjee.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Oh, thank you so much for the warm welcome. It is absolutely fantastic for us to be here in Montenegro. I've never visited before, and the welcome has been absolutely superb. So thank you. I wanted to share a little bit about the story of Shazam, and Tanya said she's heard it before. But actually, my business partners and I had a great time starting and running this company. But there were some challenges which were not necessarily obvious. There were some really hard times which we went through. And looking back now, it's been 18 years since we started the business. And I wanted to share some of those stories with you because for some of you, you might think it doesn't always meet the eye. And you might experience some of these in your business as well. And also to have the opportunity at the end to answer any questions. So please, while I run through the story, if you have any questions, please do ask me at the end. My name is Dhiraj, and I'm from India. My grandfather was actually the Admiral of the Indian Navy, and he was a big influence in my life. And when I was growing up, he said to me, you know, if you put your mind to something, if you really want to make it happen, you can make it happen. And that was a real kind of inspiration behind my startup story and adventure. My dad worked for Air India, and I grew up all over the world in Greece and in France and in Switzerland, and I spent some time in Singapore and in Japan. But I went to university in the United States, to Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. And after university, I joined a management consulting firm called Bain, based in San Francisco, which is how I found myself in Silicon Valley at the beginning of the internet boom in 1995. I was at Stanford Business School, where the internet was just starting up, and everyone had this dream to be an entrepreneur. And my business partners, actually, sitting next to me, Chris, he was my drinking buddy. We used to have beers and say, "Oh, wouldn't it be great to be an entrepreneur?" It just sounded like the right thing to do at the time. But we didn't have any ideas, which is a problem. Look, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Chris had lots of ideas. They were mostly just terrible. But it was fun to kind of brainstorm until he was terrible at music. He would always hear songs and have no idea what it was. So he had an idea. His idea was, what if I could connect with every radio station in the country? And so whatever they were playing, I would have that information, so I would be able to know what song was playing on the radio. That was his idea. And he was at Berkeley Business School at the time, and he was taking a strategy course, and his professor said to him, think about what would make your company go out of business. So he thought, what if I could identify any music using a mobile phone? That would make my radio identification service go out of business. So that's how he came up with the idea of identifying music using a mobile phone. Now, when he told me this idea, I said, look, Chris, that's great. This is much better than any idea you've had so far. But let me ask you a few questions. So where are we going to find this technology? And he said, oh, we'll invent it. So, okay, he's not technical, by the way. I said, all right, so you want to identify any music at all? Where are we going to find all this music we're going to identify? He said, oh, we'll talk to the record companies. I'm sure they can help us out. Now, at the time, I was working for an internet consulting firm, and one of my clients was a record company. And I knew perfectly well they did not have a digital database of all the music which was available. So I said, okay, let's imagine we have all this music. What's the business model? He said, this is how it works. So when people identify a song, they're going to buy a CD, and that's how we're going to make money. I was like, Chris, have you heard of something called Napster? People are just downloading songs for free. I mean, there's no business model here. It's like, these are details. So I'm sort of over-analytical, and Sanya loved this story when she heard it. So I did a little spreadsheet. I said, chances of inventing the technology, I don't know, 20%. Chances of finding all the music that's sold in the UK, 30%. Chances of coming up with a business model, I don't know, 40%. So I multiplied all of this through, and the number I came up with was chances of creating this business is about 4%. So I quit my job, joined in with these guys, and we started Shazam. I gave a talk once which was called Don't Be Stupid, and that's why the title, you know. We had a secret weapon, my business partner, Philippe. So Philippe and Chris were together at Berkeley Business School, and Chris said, Philippe has superpowers. He is amazing. He does the work of, 3 people. And it's true. Philippe was amazing. But the first thing we had to do to start the business was to invent the technology. Now, I show this slide as if I know what it means. I really don't, because I'm not technical at all. But I'm so not technical, we didn't even know what field of science we're talking about. It turns out the technology is the field of digital signal processing. And it also turns out that the experts in digital signal processing happen to be at Stanford at Berkeley University. So it was really lucky for us. I was living in London at the time. Chris and Philippe were finishing their MBAs. And, so the slide seems to be going forward. They spoke to the head of the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics at Stanford University. And they said, we're trying to invent this technology. Can you help? And this is the problem which they described. They said, we want to identify music with about 15 seconds over a mobile phone handset, which, the microphone is not great. It's got to match against 1 million songs as quickly as possible so that the user is not waiting, and at an economic cost so we can build a business. Who are the best PhD students that you've come across? And Dr. Julius Smith gave them a list of the best PhD students over 25 years. And number 1 on that list was Dr. Avery Wang. Now, Avery was a scientist. He was working on music algorithms, minding his own business, when Chris and Philippe sent him an email saying, would you like to do a startup with us? So he just hit delete. But they never gave up. So they emailed him again and said, we'd love to meet you. We've heard great things about you. So he took the meeting. And they described this problem to him. And by the way, they'd spoken to about 15 or 20 experts by this time, and no one had said it was feasible. Avery was the only one who didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He said, which was a big mistake. So we brought him on as our co-founder and business partner after that. Now you're going to ask me, I know one of you is going to ask me, so how does this thing actually work? And the way it works is that the algorithm looks at the key features in the music. It extracts the key information and matches against fingerprints, a database of fingerprints. And if there's a match over time, then you get this sort of line, this angle line as the features and the fingerprints match over time. If you think my technical explanation is rubbish, and I agree that it is, then let me just play for you a sample. So Chris and Philippe and I were running around in London, taking samples of music in bars and pubs and cafes with our mobile phones and sending them back to Avery to analyze. Can we try to play that first clip, and I'll ask you if you can name that tune. Yeah. What's that song? Anyone? Yes. Yes, very good. Never Ending Story. Okay, can we try playing the second clip? Name that song. Very good. So that's what Avery was hearing when he was receiving those samples. We gave him 3 months to invent the algorithm. 3 months, because we were trying to build this business. And he was on the verge of giving up. He was practicing his speech to say to the rest of us, I can't invent this thing. And then something amazing happened. He had a breakthrough. He was in a cafe, and he was overhearing a conversation between two people talking about looking up a number in a phone book. And that made him think about how quickly you can find a number in a telephone directory, even though there's thousands and thousands of numbers, and you converge in an exponential way. If I keep going with my technical explanation, all of you will leave. So I'm going to move on very quickly to what happened next, which was with a demo built by Avery, with a business plan, which I had written, we managed to go and raise $1 million in angel investment from a number of investors who were interested in technology, which let us move to the next stage of the business, which is building the team. Now, that is my old flatmate, Christian, who built a large part of the early system. That's our CTO, Mike, who was an inspiration for many of us. That's my cousin, McCullough, who's the only one who knew anything about music in the company, and later married my business partner. But that's a different story. What we hadn't taken into account in this entrepreneurial adventure was our timing. So we started the business in 2000, just when the internet bubble was at its peak. Everyone thought, this is great, this is the new economy. 6 months later, the bubble had burst. The NASDAQ went from about 5,000 down to 2,000. It took us 13 months to launch. When we launched, we really didn't have a business model. We charged customers to identify music, and it cost them 50p. The way it worked was, it was a voice call to an IVR service. You dialed 2580, and it would hang up after 15 seconds, and the user would get a text message with the name of the song and the artist, which would charge them. But half the money went to the mobile operators, and we were just burning cash. This was in 2002, 2003, 2004. We tried different business models. Nothing really worked. And when you are running a business which is burning more money than you're making every single month, we were on the verge of bankruptcy. We would have board meetings where we would ask, are we bankrupt yet? Because if you trade bankrupt, they can lock you up. It's illegal, which is, even I would have a sense of humor failure in jail. Now, the reality is that the only reason the business survived was because we managed to sell our core technology to a buyer who wanted to use it to monitor what was being played on radio and in public venues so that artists could get paid. It was only many years later, in 2008, when the iPhone launched, and specifically that the App Store launched, that things really changed. And the reason it changed was because suddenly users didn't have to remember a 4-digit code. They didn't have to, dial a number. It was a simple app. And Apple spent millions advertising the App Store and advertising what new apps like Shazam could do. I even showed my mother when I was visiting a few months ago. She said, oh, it's really easy to use, which was fantastic for me. And this is what happened with the usage. So for the first sort of 5, 6, 7 years from launch, almost nothing happened. And then the usage really took off, and the growth was exponential. So it took us, from the time we launched, it took us 10 years to get to the first billion users of Shazam. It then took 1 more year for the next billion users. 2 months later, we had another billion. So that gives you a sense for the incredible kind of growth from having the right user experience for what the service actually was. Now, I usually don't talk about lessons learned because I think each entrepreneurial journey is unique. But there's a few things which I reflected on as I tell the story. Let me not beat around the bush. We would have been bankrupt a long, long time ago. I would not be standing here had it not been for a few things which we were lucky. If we didn't believe in ourselves, we wouldn't have started and we wouldn't have kept going. If we didn't believe in each other, we wouldn't have had the strength to push through those hard times when we're literally facing bankruptcy every week. If we didn't work flat out, I don't think we could have ever got there. I remember I wrote the business plan in a week, 7 back-to-back 17-hour days. And that's sometimes what it took to get through things. If we weren't a little bit crazy, I don't think it could have worked. What's an example? So we did a deal with Amazon when we had barely launched. I said to Philippe, I said, you're crazy, you're never going to get a deal with Amazon. 3 weeks later, we were live on their site. We wouldn't have made it if we stopped enjoying ourselves. So we always enjoyed the ride. It's an adventure being an entrepreneur. It's fun to have a startup. It can seem really hard, and you are working flat out, but you have to enjoy it. We would have gone bust if we ever took no for an answer. I remember when we were trying to get a letter from a mobile operator called O2 to say that they would partner with Shazam. We called them 43 times without them ever calling us back, until we finally got through and got that letter. Otherwise, we would never have got the funding. We would have been bust if we sat around and thought about things. So we just had a massive action bias. So whatever challenge came up, we would say, let's do something about it. Let's act against that. Let's make it happen. And we didn't look for shortcuts. We tried to do things the right way, the best possible way, professionally, thoroughly. Because I think that's what it takes to build a great business. And let's be honest, there's no way we would have made it if we took it too seriously. Doing a startup is not a matter of life or death. It is just work. And that's why I feel incredibly privileged to be here. We got so lucky with timing, so lucky with some of the decisions we made, so lucky with things which went our way. And it's my privilege to be able to share some of these with you. So if I had to summarize, I think these are what characterized the DNA of Shazam. One was quality and the people that we chose to work with. The second was the persistence, was to just keep going, regardless of what people said to us. It can't be done, it can't be invented, you can never build this database, and so forth. The third was really about the teamwork. My business partners and I were all equal shareholders in the company, and that was part of Chris's vision. We're all in this together. And every single one of the dozens and dozens of people we hired early on to help us with this journey. And then the fourth one, that's our international director. He was in his 40s, for God's sakes. Look at him, that's crazy. Just have fun and enjoy the ride. So that was my takeaway from the experience, and I wish every one of you here who is either an entrepreneur or building a business every success. It can be stressful, it can seem really hard. Just push on through and enjoy the ride. Thank you.